My name is Wilson Bautista. I am the CEO of June Cyber. We support your IT, cybersecurity, compliance, and automation needs. And I've got my colleague here, Tim. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I work with our channel team over here at Hook Security. We're a security awareness training tool. Do a lot of work with MSPs and MSSPs, and so really excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. Awesome. And today we're talking about cybersecurity awareness for business owners, navigating today's evolving threats. Now, cybersecurity is always changing. It seems like every day there's always some kind of attack. I was actually reading something today on LinkedIn from a colleague that was telling me about SIM swapping, right? And how that is prolific in different ways. And one of the reasons why it was able to be successful is because security awareness was not instilled in an organization well enough to realize that they were actually getting attacked. How can we use security awareness to beat this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what your posture around security awareness is. So at Hook Security, we would say that security awareness training is one of the most important things you can do to create a safe environment, not a secure environment. We like to use the
Hmm.
word safety because I would say for most things, security is physical and you can transliterate the physical aspects of security to a digital environment. But what's really important is, do people feel safe in their digital environments that they're working in within their own knowledge? And so we want people to, we're trying to produce cultures of safety as pertains to security awareness. And so it's what that looks like. And the, I guess if you want to sum it up in a sentence or two, it would be, do people have a baseline skepticism of most things that if they're really pressed, they're going to refuse whatever call to action it would be, whether that's a physical security threat, a digital security threat, or anything like that? Is there a baseline skepticism that produces a psychological safety to say, I'm not going to engage in this. I'm not going to click on this. I'm not going to let this person in without scanning in. I'm not going to do anything that could potentially jeopardize something that could hurt our organization, myself, or otherwise.
Like, how do we take what you're saying is a definition of skepticism in security
Yeah.
and not turn that into uh, a variation of paranoia, right? Because
Yeah.
this is very simple to do, right? How do you
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah. I think there's a way to cultivate skepticism instead of paranoia. I think skepticism is produced, a baseline safe skepticism is produced by testing and training that makes you feel comfortable, right? So, for example, our tools, specifically with our phishing tests, we try to present them in a way that when a user fails, it's an educational and learning moment and not a slap on the hand, not an embarrassment. Because when people are embarrassed or they feel like they're being punished for failing a phishing test or something like, that's what's going to produce the paranoia. And that's going to make them not comfortable raising their hand when something comes across their inbox that they're unsure of, because their previous experience is that, oh, if I fail this or if I raise my hand on this, I'm going to get embarrassed again or made to feel like an idiot. And so we go about producing our testing so that it's when they do fail, it's like, hey, this was a phishing test that you did fail, but that's okay because now you get to learn. And moving forward, you're going to be much more prepared for this. And your environment, your organization, your team are going to be safer.
Yeah, I think that's really important to emphasize is that you're educating rather than punishing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's quick. I spent a lot of time in the military and it's really quick to just point out, hey, you screwed up. You're the joke of the day. But in reality, people don't want to be embarrassed and people don't want to be the brunt of jokes. Engaging in a phishing campaign that if they do click, it educates them and it allows them to learn from essentially a failure. You consistently do this. It's not, oh my God, I got fished again. Oh, everybody's going to be on me. My manager's going to be on me. It's going to be like, ah, they got me. They got me.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one. All right.
Yeah.
What did I do to mess this one up? Like, oh, I see. I Like I was just reading it fast and they switched the letters on the email.
Yeah,
They got me. I did everything I thought I did, but they got me this time. When they click on those things and it's an educational experience, it's memorable too, right?
right.
It's
Yeah,
okay. How did they get me? I got it. And now you're reinforcing what they've already learned, maybe from the last phishing campaign or from 5 phishing campaigns ago. And now they're relearning or remembering all of those things. And then they're applying now a new skill that maybe
right.
that we're seeing like cyber actors, cyber threats, and phishing actors um, do now. And is that what you do typically with your phishing campaigns? It's not like the same email, right? We know it's not going to be the same email, but
Right.
talk about like the different techniques and tactics that these cyber criminals are doing.
Yeah. So it's super interesting how it just evolves on almost a daily basis. We have a full-time services and training team that are doing the best to be aware of phishing scams that are actually out there that are going to be relevant to all of the clients that we service. So, for example, one of the tests that we produced and added to our library last month in January was a W-2 tax return scam, which is super poignant. And so there's things where tax season has started, people are going to be aware of that. And so it's going to be harder for them to be like, is this fake or not? Something that we see.
Really
Yeah,
relevant right now.
yeah, absolutely. And it's going to continue to be up until April. And so that's something that we're just putting out there of, hey, double check any sort of email you get that's referring to tax season, filing your taxes, things like that. Because most of these scammers are opportunists and they take advantage of what's actually happening. We also find that as our technology evolves, these scammers and bad actors' manipulation of that changes as well. So something we're seeing a lot are push notifications, multi-factor authentication scams, because again, those push multi-factor authentication is, I think, super important and adds more layers of security, which I don't think are ever bad, but also they're now in a position where they can be manipulated. For example, they can send a phishing test that is spoofed to look like a Duo push notification or something, or an Okta push notification or something like that. They click the link or whatever, and now they're in on your email client, or they ask you to enter some sort of credential, and now they've got that. And so those are things that I think are super high up there. Something else that I think is really unique, and this is some research I've been reading recently, the demographic of users who are more at risk of being targeted and falling prey to these has flipped. So previously, we have seen baby boomers, Gen X being the generations that are typically less tech savvy, and so they're considered a higher risk. But we've seen that's almost completely flipped with millennials and Gen Z specifically, and I'll throw my own generation under the bus. Gen Zers have grown up in such a technologically dense environment, such a saturated digital environment, that being online, having all of their information online is second nature, truthfully. And being unprotected of that, not really caring, it comes pretty naturally that it doesn't to baby boomers and Gen Xers and older generations. There was some sort of statistic recently that baby boomers, 80 some percent of them say yes, cyber threats are possible to hit me and I should be aware of them. Whereas Gen Z, it was like 35-40% or something like that. Believe that, which is crazy. And so we have a whole generation of people entering the workforce, which the vast majority of our jobs today are saturated in a digital environment that they're like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter, which I think in the next 5, 10, 20 years, I think that's going to be the biggest threat is really flipping the script on the education side here and being like, no, these younger generations that really know this technology better need a better security posture or need to be educated on the security side. So,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you say that because like different generations have different views on security because if you think about it, like the internet was literally just born a few decades ago. And so the boomers, Gen X, even millennials have seen this vast growth in technology and it's and the curve is just fast now. It's super fast. Where Gen Z and what Gen A now, they're just like it's saturated, right? Like you said, it's saturated, and it's just like, this is like second nature, right? It's like, oh, a cybersecurity attack, another one. Oh, they stole my credit card again. It's just you get to this, they may feel like, okay, this is just like another walk in the park. Something's gonna happen. I'm gonna have to call the bank again and not not be comfortable for a little bit. But there's like really clear impacts to businesses, right? Because as these Gen Zers are going to take over these businesses, the the posture of complacency needs to change, right? Because if you feel that, oh yeah, it's just another cyber attack, when that cyber attack impacts your business, what's that going to do? Let's talk about that. What are the cost of cybersecurity breaches today, and what are the implications for not just people that have been owning businesses, but people that are going to own businesses here in the future? Why do they need to think about this?
Yeah, I think the for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, truthfully, they're being targeted the most. Obviously, we see these really big headlines of MGM or Microsoft getting hit with these different things. And obviously, they have the bigger dollar amount, so they are targeted really heavily. But also, those organizations do have, as much as we see these headlines of breaches, this, that, and the other, they do have a higher security posture in that they have more things in place to mitigate those risks, whereas the small mid-sized businesses don't. And the resources that a scammer or a hacker, that's a generous term for them, would get from them are not as significant, but the entry point is way easier. And I think that's a big part. And also, like, it's just getting easier to do this. And the threat for small and mid-sized businesses is going to continue to get there. I'm trying to find some data that we have that I know I remember here, but something like 90% of breaches begin with a phishing email. So that's a big part of it. And then the average downtime for a breach is almost a year. It's 287 days. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Or the average time it takes for a security team to identify that breach and fix it to whatever degree they can. It takes a long time. And then the average cost of a data breach is over $4 million. What we're looking at is livelihoods, right? Businesses, multiple people. It's a severe risk that is only getting more frequent and more common.
So when we talk about the big businesses and the like MGMs that are getting hacked, and 90% are coming from a phishing email, right? And you say
Right.
that small businesses is just easier, right? There's a lot more small businesses, right? But something that you said was it takes a security team 287 days or something like that to get back from a breach. But small businesses, mom and pop shops, even like those up to like maybe 100 folks, don't have a security team. They have maybe an IT guy or a couple or maybe five
Right.
IT folks that are
Yeah.
supporting them, right? So, like, awareness is key, right? What the role of human error and a lack of awareness seems to be contributing to security breaches. So when we talk about like the benefits for an informed and vigilant staff, what can we do to bolster that? What can we do to make it like an educational experience other than a phishing campaign?
Yeah. I think, man, that's a great question. For me, it goes back to how we go about training content. I think the overall cultural realignment we need to have is that education is good, regardless of what it is. In every single area of life, continuing to learn is a good thing. And that should be applied to security awareness. And I think if we have a baseline of that in everything that we're doing, that's going to be super impactful. But then that also feeds into our training content. You can say, oh, yeah, I want to learn. But if our training content isn't super engaging and it isn't going to draw people in to, one, show them the importance of this, but two, also just make it enjoyable. That's part of also what we're doing at Hook Security is making sure that our training content is as engaging as possible so that it's effective, not just because it's fun to make funny skit based security awareness training videos. It is fun,
Yeah.
but it also does something good that's way bigger than all of that. I'd say that's the main thing is why let's have a culture that's always focused on learning and apply that to everything.
Yeah, and I think that's like a top-down thing too. It's not just like,
Right.
all right, the security of this business wants to have a security culture for all of you, and you need to have an open mind and learn. Well, if your CEO, if the leaders of business don't have that mindset, it's going to be a difficult and long
Yeah.
uphill battle. It's going to be
Right.
challenging.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
The part of that is that I was mentioning earlier is that the top down is so important because the culture and the attitude towards this that an organization is going to have when the top brass are saying, don't screw this up, make sure you're aware of this so it doesn't hurt my bottom line. That's way more different than, hey, we want to make sure that you guys feel safe and protected in the digital environments you're working in so that you can also achieve your goals that you're working on. I can tell you which one I'd be much more receptive to and much more aware of. And spoiler alert, it's not the first one. So,
Yeah, no, I've dealt with the first one a lot, and it's just, oh God, I don't want to mess up. I don't
yeah,
want to mess up because if it messes up with the bottom line, I'm going to get fired. And no one wants to feel like that. But then also the flip side of that is that we also can't like just say that there are no consequences and it's okay and too fluffy and too soft because there are real life implications of this, right? An organization, somebody is in charge of accounting and they get an email and they like send over all your transaction information and they're just like this looks legitimate but I don't want to mess up if it is legitimate and I say it's phishing so I'm just going to not do it and then something happens now the bottom line's impacted because it was a legitimate email, right? And they thought it was a
yeah,
phishing email because they thought they were going to mess up but it worked reverse. So if you have that open mind, open learning culture and also be able to balance it with the decisions that you make are important and it's okay if we like mess up on a phishing email. This is practice, right? And like when you're up to bat, I need you to hit,
yeah,
right? It doesn't need to be a home run, right? But I need you to get on base, right? Get on base and the team will back you up. But you got to do
right,
your part. You got to do
right.
your part. Okay, so practical tips and best practices for business owners that want to improve their cybersecurity hygiene. Besides the phishing emails, what can we do to increase our security, not be paranoid, and be impactful with our messaging?
Yeah, man, that's a good question too. There's so many things, and so it's hard to be like, man, what's the most relevant here? I think one, there's just so much out there to help people with this that I think people aren't aware of. And so I think my first practical advice is just to be curious of what you can put in place to protect because one, I first of all, I work with so many wonderful MSPs that do really great work to protect these organizations, and I think they make it really easy for these small and mid-sized businesses. And so, one, I would always say find a really great MSP to help you out because there's a lot of them. Two, I think it's also there are tools out there that you don't have to pay for. There are things that can keep you safe. And for example, Hook Security, we have our entire Hook Studios, which is free security awareness training content that you can just enjoy. And so things like that. So I think the most practical thing is just be curious. The daily habits is, gosh, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it all goes back to the baseline skepticism and the baseline curiosity, right? If I'm looking at something that's in front of me, is this something that makes sense to me for what I've done? It makes sense to be in my inbox. And is there a risk of this hurting or impacting my business? And if you have those, really, I think you're good. And then also, once you develop that baseline skepticism, there is that psychological safety that you can just live in. So, I don't know how many actual practical tips that was, but
In addition to those great tips, I think that as we're an MSP, Gene Cyber is an MSP, we want to make sure that our clients are always in the know. So every week we have a cybersecurity newsletter that has the latest
yeah,
cybersecurity news, not just to like alarm, maybe an alarmist, just to say, hey, these are some of the things you might want to be out on the lookout for. For example, like you said, it's tax season, right? Those W-2s are coming out, right? And people are gonna say, "Hey, I need your information. I need your social. Give me your social." Stuff like that. It's really it makes that makes sense. We're in that moment. We do newsletters that try to inform. Also, as a business owner, I want to make sure that I'm also pushing like, "Hey, we are seeing a little uptick of phishing emails that are coming in. Please be alert." If you have a regular brick and mortar business, put up signs, right? Be aware. If it looks fishy, don't get hooked. It's just
right, right.
sorry, I got to put that pun in there. It's
No, that's all right. We love to hear it. It's great.
yeah. So even if we have all of those things put in place and we developed like a security aware culture, our top down leadership is all in, we still like trip. And one of the things that you have in a lot of businesses is you like have a business continuity plan. If there's an earthquake, or if, like in our case in Florida, if there's a hurricane
Yeah,
and we can't function because our building doesn't have power, what do you do? As a business owner, the answer is not, I'm going to sit on my hands and I'm going to wait this out. Because guess what? You got to make the money. You got to increase the bottom line. How do you prepare for the unexpected? I clicked in this. Oh my gosh, I messed up. What do I do?
yeah, man. That's a great question. I think there's always opportunity to reevaluate. People learn best by experience. And also, again, I think this goes back to even there's so many things out there to help prevent that, the point of failure, the actual breach, and things like that. But there's also so much out there to help on the cleanup side of things. I mentioned the 287-day issue, but also there's really great response teams and response plans that can help. And again, working with a really great MSP can be super impactful to that. Even if it's after a breach, there's organizations that can come in and support you on the back end of that.
Yeah, I think that with business owners having that continuity plan, if a disaster does happen, what you're getting about like having a response plan is super important. In cybersecurity, we call it an incident response plan. Pretty
Yep.
simple. And it's not just having the plan, right? Because you could have a piece of paper, you could have the policy, but it does not mean anything if you're not doing it, right? But
Right.
but people are like, okay, that's great. I have an incident response plan. That's awesome. But do you know if the people that are involved in your incident response plan are aware of
Yeah.
the actual plan? And when the stuff does hit the fan, will they be able to do what you need to do? And a great way to prepare for that is actually practice the incident response plan. And cybersecurity, we call it tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, oh, your IT team is going to do what they need to do. It's no, when there's a cybersecurity incident, you have to get multiple functions within an organization involved. You got your leadership, you have legal, you have communications, you have IT, you have at least those four different operating lines that need to support that incident response effort. And the day that you don't want to see if your incident response plan works is the day when you have an incident, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming and talking a little bit about
Yeah.
cybersecurity awareness and how we can evolve and learn to be more aware, but not also be paranoid, and have
Yeah.
fun and create an educational experience for your employees, for your organizations that the organizations that you run. Any last words?
No, I think that's great. The last thing I would say is just thinking back to the last thing, be preemptive. I can't tell you how many times people come to us and they're like, yeah, this organization had a breach, and so we need a little bit more training. Don't let that be you. Let's have a culture of learning, and let's start before we have any issues. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.